Hey guys, Girl Got Game here. Welcome back to Seduce Me 2. We're doing Sam's second good ending, and Sam only has two good endings. Gosh darn, I dyslexia'd myself twice, or 3 times even, maybe, by getting the number of good ends and bad ends mixed up. Apologies for that. Sam only has 2 good ends, 3 bad ends. I'll clear that up now and apologize for messing that up severely. So, as promised, though, I'm going to do Sergeant's training sessions. So if you're interested, you can stick around for that. Otherwise, I'll put a timestamp where you can just watch the difference in endings. But first, we're going to explore and find him. So we need to go right twice, I think. Yes. Go right again. I was heading right anyway. Might as well do it again. I turned right and headed down the hall, greeted by more fantastical decor. My journey down the hall led me to a set of stairs which led to a door to the outside. I remember Diana's warning, but I was curious. I slowly approached the door and opened it, peeking outside to see what it held.
Soldiers!
Hi! I jumped at the sound of a commander's voice, feeling the chill that ran through me when I first encountered the Demon Lord in the Incubi's vision. The Demon Lord wasn't here, was he? Just another brute. I peeked past the door once again to see the large, muscular man whom I had met when I fell into this world, barking orders at a large group of soldiers. They were all attentive and obedient towards each command he shouted.
You all performed well in holding the Demon Lord off. But if we want to win this war, then you will need to become much stronger. We want to win, yes?
Yes, Commander!
Impressive.
Good! Then pair up and fight like you were fighting the Bastard Lord himself. Keep going until I give you clearance to stop!
On his order, the soldiers turned either left or right and began to spar as if they were seriously battling each other. It was almost scary to watch, swords clanging violently and shields beating against steel.
Human!
Ah! Hi! I felt my fear take over as he called out my race, making me stand up straight as the door swung fully open on its own. I wasn't able to hide anymore.
Front and center!
On its own, my body began to walk towards the muscled Ogre Man, and soon I was standing front and center with the sparring clashing behind me. This is the first time that the the trainer I've been spying on has called me out.
Do you have jurisdiction to leave your room, human?
Or did Shadow call me out? I can't remember. Oh, Shadow did. We had a combo. Yes. I felt my answer force itself out, as if I had no control over myself. Why was this happening? I looked at the Ogre Man and noticed his golden eyes burning into my gaze. Was he using his powers on me? The man crossed his arms and looked at my form.
Why are you here, then?
I was curious. With a raised eyebrow, the man uncrossed his arms and looked over to a weapon rack. On it were spears, swords, shields, and other weaponry that I really did not want to deal with while wearing a wedding dress.
Tell me, are you proficient with a sword?
Was he seriously going to make me fight? I somehow regained control of myself and shook my head. No, I mean, I can do Taekwondo, but...
Taekwondo? What is that?
I gulped, but remembered that he was a demon. Human fighting was not like demon fighting. Well, it's a form of fighting without weapons.
What, like brawling?
No, it's like precision fighting, I guess? I mean, I can't really show you in this dress, but...
Then take off your clothes.
It's so simple. My face instantly turned red. What? I stepped away and crossed my arms over my chest, feeling myself become red in anger and embarrassment. No! Why would I do that? The man growled and sighed, rubbing his head. Do you seriously think asking me that was a good idea? What was he, a pervert? The man then crossed his arms again and stared plainly at me.
If clothes hinder you from defending yourself, you shouldn't wear any. You can look as fancy as you want for whatever reason you want, but fancy clothes won't protect you from a blade.
I stared. Was he seriously giving me a lecture about clothes and defending myself? He looked pretty serious, so I continued to listen without interrupting.
There's only one thing in this world that should matter to you. Yourself. If you can't protect yourself, then you need to fix that. Even if that means stripping out of that wedding garb thing or whatever you're wearing.
But I don't need to defend myself right now. I just wanted to show you...
Then show me or don't suggest the idea. Words also have power here. Unlike the human world, we take what we say very seriously.
I suddenly felt small looking at the man. Was he trying to teach me a lesson? I understood what he meant, but was he trying to teach me or berate my reaction? He was making no sense, yet I felt like I should have been listening intently and obeying. Was it his commanding aura? The man shook his head and pointed at the door I came from.
Return to where you came from. You'll be sent back to the human world soon enough. Don't distract my soldiers from their training.
I'll come back and talk to you when I'm a little more appropriately dressed. I looked behind me to find some of the soldiers looking at me as they fought. Some in hunger, some in confusion, others in disgust. My arms wrapped themselves around my form and I shivered before nodding to the commander and rushing towards the door. Maybe I should have stayed in my room. I marched back to my room, determined to not allow my curiosity to get the better of me anymore. Ha ha ha, I'm sure. Okay, so that's that. Probably we'll come back in when we have to pick a trainer, so I'll bring you in for that, guys. Okay, here we are. So now we get to choose. I'm going to choose Sergeant. There he is. Diana nodded. Sergeant was the military commander, and I could tell he was strong just from looking at him. He was my best bet in learning how to defend myself. Okay, so now we can skip again, so it should be right now. Here we go. I chose to train with Sergeant. He seemed to be skilled in combat, and he was the commander of the main army, so I trusted him to train me to be strong and dependable. I didn't want to be a silent observer in this war. I would pull my own weight. Sergeant led me outside of the castle onto an empty training ground. Footprints and wear showed that the space was well used, but the only ones in the area at the moment were Sergeant and myself. The air seemed fresh, and the faint smell of flowers and fauna swept past my nose. However, I didn't get time to enjoy the atmosphere.
Human, I will not waste my breath hollering at you like a soldier, but I expect you to listen like one. Now stop sniffing the air and face me.
I quickly nodded and turned around to face Sergeant. I pressed my arms to my sides, ready and at attention for my next order. Sergeant stared hard at me, making me slightly nervous. How was he going to train me? Sergeant began to slowly walk around my body, letting his eyes trail up and down my form in an analytical gaze. I stood still, not sure if he wanted me to follow along, and knowing he would command me to move if I needed to. He remained silent, walking in circles around me like a slowly encroaching vulture. I felt a twinge of irritation at his lack of action. I was supposed to be training. Relax, girl. What are you doing? It's fine. I had to remain calm. He was probably figuring out what I could and couldn't do based on my body type. It was a smart thing to do rather than teach me something I might not be able to do. What wasn't smart was feeling his hand push against my back and shove me forward, making me land on my hands and knees. God! Hey! I looked back, suddenly angry at Sergeant. What the hell was that for? I locked eyes with Sergeant to see him crossing his arms and almost smirking down at me.
So you do have some rage in you. Good.
What? Rage? Was I supposed to be angry? I quickly jumped back onto my feet and stood up, brushing myself off as I glared at Sergeant.
Rage is a form of raw energy, wild like fire and tamed with patience. If used properly, rage can be very deadly. Very few demons can harness it, but brute demons are the masters of rage.
I felt a little enlightened. Rage was also a form of energy? I felt a small spark in my core, remembering how angry I was with Sergeant, and mentally noted that what I felt could be tapped into rage energy, instead of just felt as a regular emotion. Sergeant cracked his neck and let out a small sigh.
However, since you're a human, there's no guarantee that you can truly use your rage in battle. This is just a test to see what you can do.
Prepare to be impressed. What if I can't harness it?
Then you're shit out of luck. I don't have the time or patience to train you like a regular soldier, human. Now is your only chance not to fuck it up.
At least he's brutally honest. I gulped silently. This was my only chance to try it. It definitely seemed like a challenge, but was I really up for it? Sergeant shook his head.
Humans are really easy to read. Don't doubt yourself just yet, human. You haven't even started.
Looking up at Sergeant, I could tell that he was being genuine. Still, I wasn't sure that I was even able to do what he expected me to do. What could rage energy do anyway? I guess I would have to wait and learn. Sergeant rolled his shoulders and held out his hand, pointing it at a training dummy that was set up in the middle of the field. As his hand hovered in the air, it began to slowly emanate a red aura. I stared wide-eyed as it began to grow in intensity.
Watch closely, human.
Soon, a black orb formed right in front of his open palm, wrapped with dark red lightning that seemed to arc over its surface. The orb grew larger and larger with each second that passed. As I looked over at Sergeant, I noticed his eyes were glowing a dark gold. His expression was full of anger, but his body was opposing the emotion on his face with a calm and concentrated stance. When the orb finally reached the size of a basketball, Sergeant pulled his hand with the orb back behind his body and then thrust it forward, releasing the orb at his target. Like a lightning bolt, the orb flew forward and slammed into the training dummy, ripping it from the rod that was holding it up. However, Sergeant suddenly vanished from his spot and reappeared right in front of the flying dummy. What the... With a swift kick, Sergeant sent the dummy flying towards the surrounding forest. The unfortunate dummy slammed and nearly exploded against the base of a tree, breaking apart into pieces as it landed. I was shaking just from the sight. How did he? Sergeant landed on the ground and turned back to me, walking away from the result of his attack. He cracked his hands and rolled his head, stretching it as if he was just warming up. That was... cool. Sergeant chuckled as he finally stopped walking. It was true, though. He was faster than I could catch and powerful enough to practically demolish the dummy. I was curious to see what he could do when he wasn't just training or showing off. Sergeant then pointed to a second dummy and ushered me forward.
Now, focus on your rage. You felt it already, but you need to rekindle it and capture it in your hand.
My hand? Sergeant nodded before reaching over and lifting my arm up, positioning it like how he did when he attacked the first dummy. It clicked. He wanted me to do the same thing he did. I looked at the back of my hand, suddenly nervous. Would I be able to do the same thing he did? He was already trained in this and knew what to do. I was practically jumping into this without a life jacket. My nerves began to dance around as fear shook my core. Even still, was rage something I really wanted to try and use? It seemed like it was some sort of volatile power, dangerous and deadly if not controlled properly. More so if I got used to my rage, would I become dependent on it? Was this something I really wanted to do? We're here, girl, come on. Yes. If Sergeant believed I could control it, then I had to believe him. He was the master of that kind of power, so he would know better than me. I focused on the back of my hand, concentrated on trying to replicate Sergeant's attack. I tried imagining a black orb appearing before my palm and watching it grow, but nothing came in reality. I began to get frustrated. Good.
Don't focus on the attack. Focus on your rage. Fuel it with reason and you will control it.
The burning flame in my gut began to flicker, reminding me of the anger I felt before. I quickly latched onto it, tightening my stomach and focused on making it burn brighter. I had to fuel it somehow. Think of your fiancé. If rage, probably think of the Demon Lord. Sam makes me so angry. I felt myself begin to think about the Demon Lord. The bastard brought me here all for spite, and I was trapped here until we killed him. I was sick just from imagining his laughter, his dark voice in the air. The more he spoke, the more I wanted to end him with my own hands. I wanted to seal his fate myself and use my anger to show him who was stronger. I was forced to remain in this world, and I couldn't do anything about it until we met face to face. I wanted to go home, but my asshole soon-to-be father-in-law trapped me here. The more I thought of it, the more the flame within me grew. My body became warm and heat surged through my veins in response. Ooh. Soon my vision became clouded in a ruby haze, as if I were looking at the world through foggy red goggles. However, the one thing that I was able to focus on was the dummy ahead of me between my fingers, glowing in a strange black aura. Was this how brute demons saw their enemies? The energy in my body began to slowly weave into my hand, forming a baseball-sized orb that slowly became bigger and bigger with each breath I took. I could hear Sergeant smirk behind me in pride. As the energy in the orb became almost too large to hold, I felt my body completely tense up and strange winds began to pick up around my body. I quickly brought the orb back and roughly pushed it forward towards my target.
Now run at it!
At his shout, I quickly stepped forward. I began to hyper-focus onto the dummy as my orb slammed into its torso and bent it back over its stand. I felt enraged that I wasn't able to break it off, adding to the energy burning within my body. I wanted to kick the shit out of it. I wanted to make it bust open like a piñata. If I had to do it with my own foot, then I would do it over and over until it was completely decimated, like how Sergeant dealt with his own training dummy. I suddenly came face to face with it as I rushed at it. I brought my leg back and slammed it into the dummy's head and ripping it from its torso. The head flew back a couple of feet and skidded across the ground before rolling to a stop by the foot of a tree. My fury became out of control. I found myself becoming livid at the results of my attack, causing me to pummel a flurry of punches into the remaining dummy torso, making it bounce off and slam itself into each impact. Grah! My knuckles and fingers were aching from each impact as waves of pain rushed through them. I didn't give a damn, nor could I find any reason to. My mind became lost in my rage, so that I continued to take it out on my non-living victim.
Hey!
From behind me, a pair of large arms hooked themselves up from my torso and yanked me back, locking their hands behind my head and effectively holding my flailing and twitching arms in place. Still, the blood-red tint of the world didn't dull, and my anger wasn't going away. I was pretty sure that I was foaming at the mouth, but my overwhelming fury overcame all of my senses.
Breathe, you little brute!
Thanks. My instincts began to kick in, forcing me to take in hard and deep breaths. With each inhale, my body became racked with shivering lactic acid, and with each exhale, the flame within my core began to slowly die. After what seemed like minutes within Sergeant's arm lock, the red within my eyes vanished, and even the dribble around my lips seemed to have vanished, leaving me an aching mess of a being and causing me to slightly go limp in Sergeant's arms.
There you go. Geez, you've got a lot of energy for a human.
I've been told this. I slowly looked back at Sergeant as he released me and stretched one of my arms up, causing my shoulder to creak and stretch out the ache within it. I felt a bit embarrassed at what I had done, but as Sergeant stretched my other arm, he laughed.
At least we can skip to teaching you how to control your rage.
How do I do that? I felt out of breath as my body became overwhelmed with a dull ache, probably from me letting loose on the dummy. Sergeant gently tilted my head side to side to stretch my neck before running his knuckles over my back, working out the unknown knots in it. Wow, a massage and everything.
Just breathe. When you're pissed, you take a step back and breathe. It's the same thing when using rage.
It seemed so simple, but if it got me out of the state I was in, then it was good enough to agree with and nod to an understanding.
Everything going fine out here?
Hey. Sergeant and I looked over to see Diana walking over to us from the castle door, crossing her arms and staring at us both.
We're good. We're just getting started.
That's good to hear. I'm on my way to the training block now to work with the troops and just wanted to stop by.
As Diana nodded and turned, Sergeant suddenly stepped away from me towards her.
Succubus!
Doubting my skills as a leader already, Commander?
I stared wide-eyed as Diana turned her head and looked at Sergeant with a stern and almost degrading gaze. What the hell? Where did that come from? Sergeant stared right back at her, but I could very faintly see his hand glow a soft layer of red before he closed his eyes and let it vanish with a breath.
No, I wasn't.
Then what is it?
Nothing.
Sergeant turned back to me and crossed his arms, obviously irritated at Diana, but somehow unwilling to fight her about whatever was on his mind. As Sergeant turned away from her, Diana shook her head and started to walk away.
You forget who trained the rebellion before you came around.
Ouch. Diana finally left, disappearing into the forest. Sergeant, however, maintained a stoned, agitated facial expression. That was uncalled for, but it put a little perspective on things. She trained the rebellion before he came and took on the role of army commander. Sergeant shook his head.
Some training you did back then, Succubus.
Sergeant? Sergeant lifted his head to look at me before letting out a sigh.
What?
Are you alright? He seemed a bit miffed, but the idea was crossed out of my mind when he scoffed and shook his head.
I'm fine. Let's just get back to training.
We continued to train through the day, switching between controlling my rage and letting it loose on a training dummy or even a tree. The longer I went at it, the easier it became to control myself and come out of a frenzied state of mind. By the end of training, I was able to do Sergeant's move, just without being able to knock the dummy off of its post. That was infuriating, but I had to remember that I wasn't going to master everything, nor was I strong enough in the first place. I was a human and not a demon after all, let alone a brute demon. I was learning how to better defend myself. Okay, so that's the first training with Sergeant. Interesting. And Diana's got a massive chip on her shoulder. Okay, so I'll bring you in for the second training session. Alright, the beginning of session number 2. I headed towards the west side of the castle, knowing Sergeant would either be there outside expecting me, or would arrive there shortly after me. Nevertheless, I was ready to train again with him. What I wasn't expecting was to see another male in the field branding a large warhammer. He seemed very intimidating, but I seemed to be less threatened than when I first met Sergeant. He, however, had a hard gaze in my direction. Who?
Human! You do not belong here!
I stared at the stranger, seeing him raise his warhammer and slam it into the ground in front of him. As the hammer impacted, the earth began to quake, and a large crack in the earth began to form, tearing its way towards me. Oh. I couldn't use my mouse. Attack, I guess. I glared at my attacker, feeling the spark in my soul start to burn as I began to rush forward. Okay, that one had a timer. You could actually see the time going down. Yeah, I feel like this is a test Sergeant left for me. With each step, the fire would then continue to grow larger, increasing the energy flowing within my body and forcing me forward. My feet skipped over the sides of the growing crack in the earth, soon becoming inaudible and light the closer I got to my new opponent. Within seconds, I was in front of my attacker with a raised fist. I slammed my fist into the being's chest, but quickly broke out of my rage state as my hit didn't send him flying back. The pain that jolted through my hand caused me to jump back and grip my fingers tightly. It was like trying to deck a steel wall. I was pretty sure I had broken my hand from the force I put behind it. Gah! What the hell? I quickly looked at my opponent as he lifted his warhammer and arched it to slam down onto my body. The pain within my hand coursed through my body, leaving me frozen.
Enough!
The hammer stopped its descent toward me, freezing right above my head. I stared at the surface that would have crushed me, slightly shaking at the realization of the situation. I could have been pulverized. I slowly looked over to Sergeant to see him walking over from the forest line. The stranger lifted his warhammer and rested it on his shoulder as he stepped back from me. This was planned?
Your hand all right?
I looked down at last in my hand, fully taking in the sight of how mangled it had become. It was quickly swelling and bruising, and I could feel the dislocation of a couple of fingers. Maybe it was the adrenaline rushing through me that blocked me from screaming at the pain. Or maybe this was me getting stronger? Hopeful question mark? Sergeant grimaced at the sight and walked over, taking my hand and observing it.
Yeah, it's fucked up pretty good.
I'm sorry, sir.
Nah, you did your job. Stand down for now, Denthulir.
I looked at the stranger to see him nod and take another step back away from me. Sergeant, however, grasped my hand, causing a jolt of pain to rush down my arm. Ow! He clasped my hand, weaving his fingers between mine and burying his fingertips into my knuckles, causing another rush of pain. Instinctively, I tried to pull away, but his grip was tight, warning me to stay put or I would cause more damage to the already wounded hand. I stared at my hand, seeing Sergeant form red energy around it. While it was gravely uncomfortable to feel the muscles and bones in my hand shift and shudder under my skin, I felt my hand slowly healing and the swelling die down. So you can use rage to even heal. Interesting. Soon enough, my hand looked completely undamaged. Sergeant released my hand and crossed his arms.
There. Better?
I observed my hand a little longer, bending my fingers and moving my hand through the air. There was no pain, nor was there any discomfort. It was completely healed. I looked up at Sergeant and smiled, nodding. Yeah, thank you. Sergeant gave me a simple nod before becoming stern.
Now, why do you think your attack didn't work?
Because I punched a guy in an armored chest. I took a moment to think of the answer. There were many things that could have been wrong. I looked at Danthuler, observing him now that I had the chance to without my rage-tinted vision. He definitely looked strong, but not strong enough to be a wall of steel. Then again, he was no training dummy either, and I couldn't decimate one of those even after a full day of training. He had pretty tough-looking pecs. I pressed my lips together, trying to come up with an answer. I'm too weak. I aimed for his chest. Should have gone for the head. Or the ghoulies or something. It made sense. His chest was built like a fortress. Add on the fact that he was obviously a demon, and you had a recipe for a normal-sized Hercules. There was no way I was going to break through to his ribs. Sergeant nodded.
He's my right-hand guy. Trained him for years and helped him become a living tank. Not even a sharp blade can cut through his chest.
Damn. I stared wide-eyed at Danthuler as he nodded and pounded his chest with his fist. I could almost hear the hardness of his skin bounce underneath his armor. Sergeant stepped towards Danthuler and turned to face me, pointing a thumb at him.
You're fighting a demon. We're not weak like you humans are. We are faster, stronger, and no more than your entire race could ever understand.
I glared a bit. The insults at my race were uncalled for, but Sergeant crossed his arms, settling into his powerful stance to remind me of who was in charge.
But demons are mortal. We all have our flaws. You just need to know how to find them.
Well, how am I supposed to find them? He attacked me as soon as he saw me.
Welcome to war, human. No one gives a shit if you're ready or not, and they'd rather see you dead than in their way.
I like Sergeant. I like his brusqueness. A harsh reality. He was right. I was going to go into a war, and I was going to get attacked without a second thought, especially because I was human. I nodded and looked to the floor, causing Sergeant to let out a sigh.
Listen, there's this story we used to pass around in our tribes to inspire our young. Want to hear it?
I looked back up at Sergeant, raising an eyebrow, but nodding out of curiosity. Sergeant stretched his neck to the side and looked to the sky.
Long time ago, a pair of demons were after the marriage of a grand chief. One was as strong as 1,000 men and could lift an entire castle off the ground with her hand. The other was meek, but he was as loyal as a person could possibly be. The chief demanded that they fight for his hand, and so, a mighty duel was called at the edge of the highest mountain. Both demons faced off, and when the battle began, the mighty demon struck first, causing the meek demon to defend himself.
I began to imagine it in my head. A large battle between a monster demoness and a small and frail demon. The demoness had the upper hand, but something told me the meeker demon would win. Sergeant continued.
The weak demon ducked and dodged every attack the larger demon threw at him until finally, he spotted a weakness and used it. With all of his might, the demon plunged his small dagger into his opponent's hand, rendering her weaponless. The smaller demon won, and became one of the most powerful brute demons of his time, with the noble chieftain at his side.
Wow. Sergeant raised an eyebrow at me.
Do you understand now? There's a reason why weaker demons still survive in battle. Just use your brain.
What a novel concept. I nodded, understanding his lesson. I had to take my time and find a weakness. Danthuler was a new opponent, someone I didn't know. Everything about him was a mystery to me, and I had to learn about him to properly fight back. Sergeant nodded to me before walking away towards the tree line, stopping and turning to lean against the bark of the tree he managed to land by.
Danthuler, beat her ass to the ground.
Aw, man. Wait, what? I suddenly looked at Danthuler, seeing him quickly take up his warhammer and attempt to slam it down onto my head. Luckily, I was able to jump back in time, seeing the hammer slam once again into the ground and form a small crater in the earth. That could have been me. I focused my gaze onto Danthuler, preparing to dodge another attack. My rage flared and the red tint in my vision came back, causing my opponent to be covered in a black aura. What surprised me, however, was how it was configured. Certain parts of his body were pulsing with energy, while others barely had the black aura emanating from them. I hadn't noticed it before until I focused on it. I barely reacted in time to a second attack from Danthuler's warhammer because of how focused I became. I had to put the battle into perspective. I was fighting him, but at the same time I had to study him. It was the most difficult multitasking I've ever had to do. The barrage of attacks continued, and I continued to duck and dodge each one. At the same time, I tried to find some way to fight back. I couldn't dodge forever. Then I saw it. His Warhammer wasn't glowing at all. If I was correct, then it was a simple Warhammer. There was my answer. But what was I going to do with it? I quickly noted the build of it. It was a solid hammer with an intricately wrapped pommel. However, there had to be a weak spot on it, something that would break it like an Achilles heel. As I dodged another attack, I managed to glimpse at a small crack in the hammer. It was small, but if I knew anything about cracking material, then I knew that if I applied my attack directly onto it, I had a chance to split the hammer open. I smirked as I fully let my rage consume my thoughts, making the Warhammer my target. I charged at Danthelier at full speed and leapt into the air, bringing a hand back while he recovered from his previous attack. With the crack in the hammer as my mark, I swung and slammed my hand into it, causing it to rupture and split open.
What?
The only thing left of the hammer was the pommel, which left his hand wide open for me. I snarled and kicked at his wrist, making him drop it and step back.
Enough!
Immediately, Danthelier jumped back, rubbing his hand with an amused but slightly proud smirk on his face. I jumped back as well, focused on breathing and calming down. As the red haze vanished from my sight, I looked at the approaching sergeant. I blushed a bit as he gave me a couple claps of approval.
Now you're thinking like a warrior.
I couldn't stop the wide-arching smile across my face. I felt extremely proud that I was praised like a warrior. I wasn't anywhere close to how Danthelier was, but for the work I had done, I was getting there. As the day went on, I was given more obstacles to deal with. I had to maneuver around dummies to get to my target, and then fight off 2 attackers at once. It was a mind-boggling experience, but I managed to get through them in the end. However, I could tell something was on Sergeant's mind. By the end of training, Sergeant couldn't tear his eyes away from the castle. I eventually looked over to barely see a figure standing by a balcony. Who was he staring so hard at? A hand on my shoulder broke me from my thoughts, causing me to look over at Sergeant in surprise.
You're done for the day. Get some rest. Prepare yourself for tomorrow.
Okay, and that was training session number 2. I can't remember if there's like a third one. If there is, I'll bring you in. If not, it'll be the castle. But either way, I'll see you in a little bit, guys. Okay, we do actually have a third training thing. Let's see what this one entails. I expected today's training to be full of fighting and brawling, just like the last time. However, as I left the castle, I spotted Sergeant sitting on the ground, looking down at a bowl that had multiple lit sticks of incense burning in it. The colors seemed to mesh into the smoke that rose from their lit ends, blending to a dull gray color before fading into the air. It was almost mystical to watch. As I walked towards Sergeant, I noticed that he seemed entranced by the lit incense bowl, focused on the smoke emitting from it. What had him entranced? Not wishing to disturb him, I stopped on the other side of the bowl, sitting down very slowly and looking into the bowl as well. The incense sticks had different scents that occasionally clashed or blended together in harmony. I could barely make out each earthy tone and every spice the smells emitted. Just letting the scents filter into my nose made me slightly dizzy. What was this?
Men's itinerary.
Huh?
It's a test. Every brute demon goes through it when they are ready to be an adult. Mostly, female brutes do it before they become hunters, and males do it before they become guardians.
I looked at Sergeant as he finally turned his eyes up to look back at me. He had a stern look in his eyes which made me nervous. What did this test have in store? So many tests in Sam's route.
Only those who can master their rage will live through this test.
Great. There was the rub. I became a little panicked. It had only been 2 days of training. How was I going to be able to pass this test, whatever it was, and live? As Sergeant saw the fear obviously stretch across my expression, he glared harder.
Are you doubting yourself already?
It's only been 2 days! No, I really wasn't sure what to think. Did Sergeant really think I was ready to do this test, whatever it was? I barely got the hang of rage energy. Sergeant shook his head and let out a sigh.
If you're not sure, then don't bother. Just leave. I'm not going to waste my time.
All right, you big baby. His words stung, but I knew that he was serious. This was my chance to show him and myself that I was strong enough to protect myself, at least for this war. I just needed to swallow my fear and do as he said. But what if I wasn't ready? What if this test proved to be fatal? What if I die without having a chance to survive? I didn't know what I was walking into. Do it. Hey, achievement. Mens Intineri. I had to try. I had to. If this was going to help me, then I had to do my best. I looked at Sergeant once more and shook off the fear from my expression, showing him that I was ready. Sergeant grinned a bit before gathering some dirt in his hand and tossing it over the bowl and incense. As the dirt collided into the bowl, a red flash sparked and burst from it, causing me to shut my eyes to block the visual impact. After a second, I opened my eyes again to see what had happened. A large red flame sat in the mouth of the bowl, dissolving the incense into it and leaving nothing but the licking tongues of the fire. It seemed to burn immensely, not showing any sign of dying.
Reach into the flame and touch the bottom of the bowl with 2 fingers.
I took a moment to absorb what he said. My thoughts instantly wanted to say no, but something told me it was something I could do without getting hurt. With a breath, I slowly lifted my hand and stretched it towards the fire, feeling the heat grow against my skin as the distance shortened. My fingertips barely caressed the flame before I almost violently pushed my hand forward. To my surprise, I felt no pain from the action, watching the fire dance around my skin, but only feeling its warmth. I let out a soft, shaky sigh before continuing forward and touching the bottom of the bowl with my fingers. I could barely feel an ooze-like texture around my nails and fingertips, but I kept focused on following Sergeant's instructions.
You're not going to go through the full test. As a human, you wouldn't survive. You'll be getting a small taste of it, enough to show me that you're strong enough to defend yourself.
Okie doke. I nodded in understanding. Sergeant continued.
What you're about to taste is fucking disgusting, but you will not spit any of it out. Understand?
Brutal honesty, okay? I nodded again.
Good. Now take your hand out of the flame.
I obeyed and watched my hand emerge from the flame with ease. Covering my fingertips was a blood-colored liquid, slowly dribbling down my fingers and onto my palm and knuckles. I stared at it, trying not to let my mind overthink what I was about to do.
When you're ready, put your fingers in your mouth and swallow that mixture.
Ugh. My mind began to fight. What was I doing? This was getting really odd. However, as my thoughts tried to assemble reasons why this was wrong, my senses became overwhelmed. What? The air around me tightened, and suddenly the ground began to shift and rumble, almost like I was sitting on a waterbed. I felt my nerves dancing and wriggling beneath my skin, making me slightly nauseous. Was the smell getting to me? The only description I could coherently think of was that I felt like I was getting high. My mind was slowly numbing, and my body was rocking at the sensations coursing through it. I had to hurry. I instantly put my fingers in my mouth and quickly began to clean the concoction off of my fingers with my tongue. Sergeant was right, the taste was absolutely vomit-worthy. It was a mixture of ash and burnt mold. If I could imagine actually trying it, the taste was like eating a wad of aged cigarettes. However, I shut my eyes and barreled through the taste, making sure to swallow it down. I could feel the effects of the concoction fuse and spread through my mouth and throat, zipping through the nerves and body. It was like eating fire. Oh. As I opened my eyes, however, I was no longer in the training grounds, but in a purple forest. I looked around, confused and lost as to what was going on as the trees swayed and shifted like apparitions. What was happening to me? I slowly stood and looked around, trying to take everything in. This was completely new, and I found myself becoming frightened. Where was I? My body suddenly began to shiver at the sound of the familiar voice. I turned my head to look and froze at the sight of who was in the space with me. Oh. Standing before me was the Demon Lord, mighty and terrifying as I imagined him to be up close. His face was dark and menacing as he gazed into my soul. His teeth were even more horrifying as he bared them at me animalistically. However, I could hear Sergeant's voice echo in the space.
Your test stands before you, human. The one standing in the way from you going home is the fuckface known as the Demon Lord.
At the mere mention of his name, I became furious. This was the monster that was keeping me from going home. This was the bastard who wanted to hurt me and bring the boys back here, most likely to punish them or force them to take the throne.
Now, beat him down!
I felt instant fury ignite within my core, making waves of rage and anger run through each vein in my body. My muscles tensed and my fists were ready to fly at my opponent. The time had come to prove myself. The Demon Lord came swinging, arching a large blade in my direction. I swiftly dodged and quickly began to assess the situation. He was armed and he was as muscular as Sergeant, if not more. Another swing, another dodge. However, in this realm I could barely make out the black aura around the Demon Lord's body. Most likely, the test was crafted not to allow me to see the weakness and energy in my opponent. Smart. I had to adjust and use my visible sight. There had to be something. His weapon was exceedingly perfect, and his grip seemed to be protected as well. I jumped away as the Demon Lord lunged at me, swinging his blade at me to slice me in half. He had a weapon, I did not. He was built, I was not. How was I going to do this? The situation slowly began to dawn on me, causing the fury in my body to lightly shudder in weakness. Was I even ready to do this? My mind began to flicker through images of my family, my friends, my fiancé. I was fighting for them. I was fighting for me, my freedom, my own need for revenge. I had to knock away any doubt in my mind and remind myself why I was there. It was all because of him. I quickly ran at the Demon Lord, my vision becoming as red as blood. As the Demon Lord prepared a stance, I raised my leg and knocked it against his elbow, bending it in the opposite direction and forcing him to drop his weapon. With a hateful snarl, the Demon Lord raised a fist of his own and rammed it into my cheek, causing me to fly back and skid across the ground. Despite the pain, I quickly scrambled back onto my feet, eyeing him with a deadly glare. I had to win this. I felt my hand pulse, tensing and becoming solid as rock at my side. Blood dripped from the side of my mouth, but I didn't care. I was going to end this. With a final battle cry, I rushed forward and raised my fist behind me, ready to slam it into the Demon Lord's face. My fist was met with his, causing us both to deadlock fist to fist. Fire and electricity bounced between our hands as we pushed against each other. I snarled and let my rage fuel into each finger, forcing his fist back. I didn't want to lose. I wasn't going to lose. I was going to beat him down and win this fight. The Demon Lord's fist tried to push back, but failed as I pressed forward, knocking his fist away from us and leaving him open. At last. I let out an angry yell as I brought my arm back and slammed it into his face hard. I stared as his face seemed to mold over my fist at the impact before he rebounded off of it and fell to the floor. This illusion was much weaker than the real Demon Lord, but I didn't give a damn. This thing was going to feel the anger I had stored in my body. I jumped onto his chest, pinning his arms to his sides with my knees, and began to pummel his face with my fists over and over. Soon enough, his face became unrecognizable and covered in blood. As it occurred, however, I barely noticed the world around me slowly change back to normal. It was only until the body below me turned into a training dummy that I had to let it sink in hard. What? The rage within my body became quickly extinguished as I stared at the broken, strong cloth beneath my body. Small scratches decorated my fist from the friction of the dummy, and I became lost as ever. I was fighting the Demon Lord. How did it become a dummy? What? That's pretty awesome, though. Our only chance to fight the Demon Lord. At the sound of a slow applause, I turned my head to see Sergeant with a smirk on his face, clapping at an apparent job well done.
I gotta admit, I'm impressed. You're probably the first human to pass that test.
It took a moment to sink in. I was in the midst of a test and I had passed? Just like that? I became extremely proud of myself, feeling utter joy rush through my body and causing me to jump up. Yeah! All right! Sergeant laughed as I pumped my fist in the air in pride.
Don't overwork yourself, or...
I barely heard him finish his sentence as I suddenly became dizzy and collapsed to the ground, immediately worn out.
What the hell did you do?
Busted.
I was training her.
And that requires a means ingenere?
Are you judging my training methods?
I'm judging your common sense.
I could barely understand what was going on around me before I opened my eyes. Despite my vision being blurred, I could see Diana above me, feeling her knees beneath my head, and Sergeant on the other side, arms crossed. Diana's hand was petting through my hair, where I felt waves of light energy pass over my head and into the rest of my body. It felt calming and comforting after using so much rage energy, and I had to hold back a moan from escaping me. Oh, Diana, the things you do to me. As my vision began to clear up, I could see Diana and Sergeant scowling at each other.
She is a human. That kind of mental exertion could have killed her.
She lived.
Barely!
I could barely open my mouth before Diana gently lowered my head to the ground and stood up, walking around my body and marching at Sergeant.
That was an unforgivably reckless choice. How am I supposed to trust you with an army if I can't trust you to take care of one human?
Watch it, Succubus. I trained our men well.
It doesn't mean anything if you don't have the sense to see the error of this choice.
Suddenly, Sergeant swung a fist towards Diana, only to be blocked by her forearm with insane reaction speed. Barely a second that passed as a dark purple flame engulfed Diana's free hand while it rammed into Sergeant's stomach.
Gah!
Nope. She'd be mad again. Before my eyes, Sergeant was sent flying back and slammed into a tree, falling at its base. Diana, however, became engulfed with black and purple flame as the scowl on her face contorted to one I recognized from the human world.
How dare you attack me! I am the one who honored your people, and you have the gall to turn and strike at me! Where does your loyalty lie?
What the hell? What was happening?
You truly thought you could hurt me. I've been fighting the Demon Lord himself for over 10 years. You're nothing compared to him.
Sergeant looked up at Diana with a pained glare of his own as Diana turned and took a single step away from him.
I will overlook that act of treason this once, but know your place, brute.
As Diana's face turned away from Sergeant, I could see a look of change in Diana's eyes, going from pure arrogance to sudden realization and regret. However, she shut her eyes and let out a silent sigh as she took another step away from us. Oh, Diana, your muse is bothering you. With that, Diana walked away, her flame-like aura completely gone from her body. Sergeant, however, didn't move and simply watched until she entered the castle and vanished from sight. As she did, Sergeant let out a sigh. I slowly sat up, taking in what had happened. What was wrong with Diana? Why did she act like that? Why was Sergeant so on the offensive? I looked over at my trainer to see him slowly stand. As I did, I noticed a very heavily burnt mark where Diana had punched him. Are you okay?
I'll be fine.
I could tell that Diana had gotten under his skin. I was concerned as to why Diana acted the way she did, but as Sergeant stood and shook his head, he looked at me.
You all right?
I nodded, feeling much better than I had before. Diana's magic must have healed me from whatever the test's effects were. I quickly stood up and grinned. So, what now? Sergeant took a moment to look at me, but I knew that I had to take his mind off of Diana to get back into properly training. I wasn't mad at him about the test. He gave me a good punching bag. He then let out a small laugh and uncrossed his arms.
You should have been born a demon. You've got the will to be one.
I'll take that as a compliment. I couldn't help but feel flattered at the compliment. As I smiled, Sergeant walked over to the dummy I was beating on earlier and set it up.
You proved yourself by passing the test. Now, we'll take the time to master what skills you have.
I walked over and stood in front of the dummy, ready for his instruction. I was able to defend myself and fight. That was the goal of this entire process. I spent the rest of the day sparring the dummy, Danthelier, and even Sergeant himself to sharpen my skills and make them better. I was completely exhausted by the time I was sent back to my room. Heyo, Sam. Oh, and then I get to do my other test. Hoi! Well, that was exciting. I don't know if the rebel leaders are going to talk about their rebellion against the Queen. If they do, I might bring you in for that, depending on what Sergeant has to say. So yeah, I guess I'll see you there, guys. Till then, I'll see you in a little bit. Yep, I got found out and I'm getting dragged into this talk again, so... Gah!
Commander, a spy.
Huh? Human?
I grimaced, now out in the open. The four stared at me with cold eyes as if they were ready to send me back to the human world as a corpse rather than going through with the siege. Alright, let's skip again. Something about having no choice? I suddenly felt the guards of each leader behind me readying their weapons. What the hell? Ah! Okay, so they're having their talk. So there's more to the story. Now Sergeant's gonna do his little bit.
That succubus doesn't deserve the throne. Plain and simple.
I looked at Sergeant, surprised at his words. As he looked at me, I could see a world of anger behind his eyes.
This world needs a real leader on the throne. Not some self-entitled princess who assumes everything is hers just because of her rank in society.
You really think that of her?
I do. The moment I swore my alliance to this rebellion, I watched her, and I don't like what I see. She's emotional and she has too much power. Nothing about her taking the throne is honorable.
But that warrants death?
Don't you get it? If we tell her to step down, then the ones who follow her will force her right back in. She's too powerful to be left alive.
I grimaced. Sergeant had his reasons, and obviously they were noble to him, but I didn't understand. Alright. I believe in Diana because she's saved me, so sorry guys. Alright. Well, I guess you guys can stick around, because we're gonna do the fight at the castle now.
When you get to the castle, I will be fighting.
She'll be fine. Don't go doubting her strength just yet.
Sergeant had to chip in on my strength. Okay, and I'll skip again. Alright, through the trees, and we'll see how we do. The journey was surprisingly swift. The sound of the war clashed beside us outside of the tree line, causing me to cover my ears a bit from the volume, but I shook my head and pressed forward, not wanting to become distracted. The goal was to get to the castle. I had to focus. Before I could, however, I stopped at the sight of imps trickling from the direction of the castle in our direction. I feel a sneeze coming on, or is that my rage? Look, either come or don't come, sneeze. Like, go away or stay. I don't know. Bleh. My rage began to ignite in my core, causing the world around me to fill with a red, misty hue. I snarled as I lurched forward and let out a resounding battle cry that echoed through the air. Grah! I could barely hear my incubus jump back at the sound, surprised to see me and hear me do what I did.
Whoa! What the hell?
A reaction! Hooray! However, I didn't care at the moment. All I could focus on were the imps that I had successfully stopped and intimidated with my howl. Get out of my way! I jutted my hand forward, quickly forming a large red orb and blasting it forward, letting it shoot through the trees and land on one of the imps, exploding on impact. That imp scream. The explosion forced many around him to be blasted away against trees or against the ground, disoriented. I wasn't going to let them pass me by, though, stepping forward and letting my instinct rush me forward at them. My body instantly reappeared in front of an imp as I swung my fist high, slamming it into the imp's face and practically breaking his head from his neck. The pain in my knuckles flared, but I didn't care. Adrenaline rushed through me and quickly dissolved it. The remaining imps began to quake and step back in fear, most likely never anticipating a human decimating their number. I wasn't so friendly and merciful, especially in my rage, as I lunged forward again and kicked at another imp, hearing the breaking of his ribs echo through the forest. Each time my eyes locked on an imp, I rushed to be in front of him before he could react and either severely knock them out of commission or killed them. Imps were almost easier than the damn dummy I practiced with. My incubus, despite probably being surprised at my carnage, followed as I continued forward, fighting through every imp that came in our way. I had lost count of how many crossed me, but I didn't care. All I cared about was getting to the castle. By the time we reached the end of the forest, there were a slew of dead and unconscious bodies behind me. I stood at the tree line, panting and feeling waves of angry heat run through my veins. I panted for air, slowly focusing on calming down as my energy quickly depleted from its adrenaline-filled high. That was all I could do before my energy was expended and a wave of exhaustion rolled through my body. Okay. Well, might as well just skip. Aw, man, Alex. And again, I'll just have to let Sam deal with you. I would have loved to have seen a CG of this fight. Would have been so cool. And then it comes down to the final choice. After Diana's sacrifice. This is where the actual difference in endings is. And it's what I thought. We have to go back to the human world. I want to return to the human world. My heart belonged there. I was human after all. I knew that the demon world was important to Sam and Diana, but I wouldn't have never been truly happy here. I missed the blue sky, and the sweet air of home called me back. The curse on me had been lifted. We fought in the war to return home. That was what we had to do. Sam smiled slightly and nodded. The incubi and the wives smiled as well, but the rebel leaders lowered their heads and looked at each other in concern. Well, it's what you guys wanted. I quickly turned to them, not wanting to leave them without a plan. Work together to rebuild this world. Diana would have wanted that from all of you. A lump in my throat almost blocked me from finishing that sentence. It was deeply painful to refer to Diana as dead, as she gave her life for me. But the world needed a leader, and it had 4. The 4 rebel leaders looked to each other and nodded.
We will do our best. Thank you for trusting the world with us.
What are we gonna do first? We could do all kinds of really amazing things, like rebuild the forests. No, wait, have a party. Wait, no.
Faye, quiet.
Oh, lighten up. The war is over. We have a reason to celebrate.
And we don't need to assassinate Diana. Double reason to celebrate. I smiled, happy to know that the world was in good hands. However, Faye took a breath and looked to me with a small smile before forming a small lavender-colored lily in her hands.
Before you go, though, since Diana is... well... she wanted to give you this.
I stared at the flower in surprise. What was it? I reached out and took it into my hands, practically feeling magic and energy run through it. It's lovely.
A flower of Lilith. But how can that be?
They were said to have died out generations ago.
I continued to stare at the flower, entranced by its spell. It was such a gorgeous-looking flower I could barely turn my eyes away.
Put it behind your ear. I think she said it was magical or something.
I tilted my head before nodding and lifting it to tuck it behind my ear. As it settled against my ear, I felt mist circle my head and form into a flower crown of lavender lilies. The way everyone looked at me made me feel like I was in my bridal wear already.
Whoa.
Amazing!
I looked at Sam, seeing him grin from ear to ear at the sight of me. I blushed, feeling somehow timid with the flower crown on my head, but happy to know that it had rendered my husband speechless. However, as I lifted my hand to the flowers, feeling their soft petals, I could feel the world fade to a white color. Huh? From the direction of where Diana had fallen, a figure stepped towards me, bathed in light. And it was Diana, slapping me in the face and said, "Give me my flower back, because you didn't fulfill my last wish." I covered my eyes with my arm for a moment before seeing who it was. Diana? With a smile, Diana stopped in front of me and gently ran her hand along the crown over the petals of the flowers. I stared wide-eyed at Diana, unbelieving that I was seeing her.
I expected you to choose the human world. Really, dear. So predictable.
Sorry. Diana. Diana chuckled, stopping me from whatever I was planning on saying, before cupping my chin to make me gaze into her eyes.
Well then, promise me that you will take care of the brute. He needs a strong woman guiding him, and you've been blessed by the flowers of Lilith. So it seems you're up to the task.
I felt tears form and drip down my cheeks, but I nodded. Something in my heart lifted and I felt at ease with everything. I had made the right choice. With a smile, Diana tilted forward and kissed my forehead beneath the crown before stepping away.
May you be happy with your choice, dear. And thank you.
For nothing. Diana slowly turned and began to walk away further into the light of the area. Sarah, who was also bathed in light, slowly appeared and waited for Diana with an arm out for her. Diana took his hand and smiled up at him before looking back to me, nodding and walking away. As they both vanished into the light, the world around me reappeared with everyone staring at me in shock.
Whoa, hey. Are you alright?
What? Huh? I quickly looked to Sam before lifting my hand to my cheek, feeling the trails my rogue tears left behind over my skin. I wiped my eyes and cheeks before nodding, laughing softly. I'm fine. Sorry. I smiled brightly, taking in a breath, and looked up at Sam while taking his hands. Let's go home. Home!
Well, you did it! Congratulations! You've made it to the end of your story. I have to say, I am very surprised at how it turned out.
Tell me the differences, Kay.
Nevertheless, I'm glad things worked out in the end, whether it was for the better or otherwise. You and Sam deserve to be happy. I mean, you both went through a dragon's trial to be together. A dragon's trial. Those are tough. Still, it all worked out, right? You defeated the Demon Lord and got to return home to the human world. Anyways, you've been through a lot, so why don't we skip to... Huh? You want to know what happened after the war? Well, I mean, I guess I could tell you. After the war was finished, the entire rebellion celebrated. Word spread far and wide about the rebellion's success, and soon every kingdom in the Abyssal Plains had become united with the new authority. You would think demons would be more hostile towards each other, being demons and all, but the threat of the Demon Lord was what brought the entire world together. Since Diana and Sarah fell to their... demise, and you decided to return to the human world with Sam, the rebel leaders took up the mantle together and vowed to bring peace and prosperity to the demon world. While it was a tough time for them, as a majority of the world still mourned the loss of the rebel queen, they managed to bring the world together and bring a steady peace to the demons within it.
Good job, guys.
They worked diligently to this day, trying to bring equality to the entire world and create a world their queen would have been proud of. And I believe that is everything that happened after, well, except for your story anyway. Sam and you returned home and prepared to get married at last. No distractions, no kidnappings.
Hooray.
Huh? How do I know? Well, I have my ways. Maybe you should check it out.
By the time I returned to the human world, I had regained all of my pre-wedding jitters. My mind began to furiously worry about the wedding again all the way until it came time to walk down the aisle. After that, it was surprisingly smooth sailing. I would forever remember the moment the bells chimed and the taste of Sam's lips on mine as we were pronounced wife and husband. The ceremony erupted in cheers, and the reception carried that energy into the night. I could go on and on about the wedding and the honeymoon, but honestly, after the war, I was more concerned of living my life afterwards. Our lives escalated to new heights after we officially became husband and wife. Sam began to climb the ladder of the public service chain and eventually became chief of police. Everyone at work respected him, even the criminals that came in after being arrested. As for me, I began to go through my own success in life, dedicating myself to becoming exactly what I wanted to be. After all, my husband was a cop who was also secretly a demon. If I put the same amount of work in as I did in the demon world, then I was going to be okay. However, there was never a day that went by that I didn't think about what was happening in the Abyssal Plains. It was a heavy chapter of my life, one that tested the love between me and Sam. To think that I was married to the Lord of Dragons. Apparently, it was a very powerful title to own, and I happened to be in love with the man who carried it. A title like that, I was sure, carried a large amount of responsibility. Still, I was confident that we could get through it and stay together no matter what came our way. Demon, devil, dragon, other D word, didn't matter to us. We were unstoppable together. The faint memory of my own power slightly tingled through me every time I grew confident, eagerly reminding me that I had strength of my own. I would never let anyone come between me and Sam ever again. Standing over the stove, I took a moment to let my mind wander as the breakfast I was preparing slowly cooked. Sam was still passed out in bed, tired from working the day before, so I let him sleep peacefully. It was adorable remembering his sleeping face. A goofy grin, hair rustled and wild, expression surprisingly peaceful. I could only chuckle as I began to plate our food and arrange the breakfast tray to carry it all. The plates weren't a problem, but the glasses and jug of orange juice made it a challenge. I, however, was confident enough in my skills to carry breakfast to our room to surprise Sam. Everything smells great. Let's hope it tastes good, too. I slowly made my way to the bedroom, climbing the stairs one step at a time. While it was usually true that you lose balance the slower you go when carrying something, I didn't want to just bolt up the stairs in the hope of getting everything there in one piece. As I finally arrived, I quietly slipped into the room. At the sight of the still sleeping Sam, I smiled and let out a silent sigh of relief before walking in and placing the tray of food on the nearby nightstand. The sight of Diana's lily caught my attention. It was in a beautiful vase Sam and I custom ordered, decorating the nightstand perfectly. Because of its magical nature, it was still alive, and looked as freshly bloomed as the day I received it. Despite it being a bittersweet day, Sam and I cherished the lily and cared for it a lot. It was a physical memory of an important chapter in my life, and I felt blessed to have it still. I walked around the bed and sat in the spot I usually slept in before gently nudging Sam. Sam? Sam, it's almost 10 a.m. Come on. When Sam didn't move, I simply chuckled. He was indeed a deep sleeper. I gently leaned in and kissed Sam's cheek, hoping to break the spell of sleep on him with true love's kiss. It's time to get up, Sam.
5 more minutes.
Hey, different background in the back, in our own bed. I could only laugh before crawling further onto the bed and sitting beside him. While breakfast was waiting, Sam deserved to sleep a bit longer. He had been working hard ever since his promotion, so it was no surprise to see him struggle to get up. I ruffled Sam's hair a bit, making him groan and push my hand off tiredly, but that only spurred me to laugh harder. As I did, Sam finally opened an eye and stared up at me, an exhausted haze evident in his gaze. I covered my mouth and giggled, a little apologetic for waking him up with my laughter. Sorry, I'll be quiet. Sam shook his head and yawned, stretching his arms up and shutting his eyes, before opening them again and lazily looking up at me from his pillow.
Morning, doofus.
Morning, Sam. I made breakfast. Sam sniffed the air and turned his head to look at the tray before nodding and returning to his lazy pose on the bed.
Smells good. Bet it tastes even better.
I would hope so. Sam gave me a toothy grin before gently pulling me down to lie beside him. Whoa, Sam! I was silenced by Sam nuzzling my shoulder and pulling me close to cuddle against my body. My face began to heat as I felt his warmth around me.
I'll eat in a bit. I want to stay here for a while.
I took the moment in before nodding and wrapping my arms around him, nuzzling his chest. Sam smiled and kissed my head, relaxing into the embrace. He felt perfect in my arms, and nothing could have been better than being held by him. It was like lying in paradise. Did you sleep okay?
Mm-hmm. You?
Mm-hmm. Our words became simple, but our embrace only intensified our love for each other. The bed became like a cloud, and the room almost lost its shape in my eyes as all I could focus on was Sam.
I love you. You know that, right?
I love you too.
I mean it. I love you and care about you so much.
I looked up at Sam, seeing the love he spoke of burn brightly in his eyes as he locked his gaze with mine. I felt my heart beating wildly in my chest before leaning up and nuzzling my forehead to his with a peaceful and happy smile. And I you, Sam, more than anyone will ever know. There was nothing more that needed to be said. Our feelings were simple but powerful enough to move continents. Our love may have seemed plain at a glance, but within our hearts burned the flames of our devotion and passion for one another. I couldn't stop my smile from growing before leaning in and kissing Sam lovingly, feeling him kiss back with the same amount of love and passion I had. No matter what, we would always find each other. We would always wind up back in each other's arms, and we would fly through every obstacle in our way on the wings of our love. And that was my perfect happily ever after. Just you and me. And a baby makes 3? Question mark? Woo! Wow, that was long. That was a super long recording session. I think my throat's destroyed. I hope I didn't sound too bad there at the end, guys. But thank you for joining me doing Sergeant's training sessions. I'm glad I did that. That was very interesting. And not too much of a difference between staying in the demon world or staying in the human world, but glad I did it anyway. And I'm glad that they're happy together. But all good things must come to an end when you realize that there's not only 2, but 3 bad endings because you hacked it up in your own brain. Right, so that should be fun. Hopefully I'll see you guys there for the bad endings. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.